I wanted to talk about the notion of feeling good. I recently started listening to Abraham through tapes, and I've been exposed to the tapes for years. Friends have given them to me, and I never heard them until recently. And when I really heard the notion of feeling good, that that could be a goal, a primary goal, it completely amazed me. And so I just want to hear a little bit more about that for now.
Well, it is amusing to us that it is such an astonishing revelation to so many of our physical friends that good feels good.
Yeah.
But we get how you get there.
Yeah.
In other words, we understand that you've been trained, that you have to work hard, and that nothing really wonderful ever comes to someone who doesn't really pay a price, and that there is such virtue in that determination and grit and all of that. But when you understand who you are and that you come from source energy, and that source energy never leaves you, is always there with a pulsing signal, and that the way you feel is in fact your indication of your alignment with your source. And as you reach for thoughts that feel good, in other words, somebody like a grandmother who loved you unconditionally and taught you the power of appreciation, gave you all of the tools that are necessary to live a wonderful life experience. So we understand how screwy it sounds when you've been part of an environment that has been conditionally or condition-oriented. When you begin to understand that you offer thought, which is vibration, and that law of attraction responds to that vibration, and then conditions actualize around that, as opposed to using your action to try to control conditions so that you can then have a feeling response, suddenly everything starts clicking into place.
Yes.
And the reason that we are so exhilarated about the words that Esther has found to demonstrate this knowing that we hold is because there is not a shred of evidence anywhere in the universe to the contrary of it. And when you catch on to the idea of it and you start looking for personal validation, before you know it, you can return to your empowered state of being.
And I've gotten that.
Yes.
It came to me like a lightning bolt, and then my life started to change in very subtle ways.
Well, until then, you see, until you get a handle on this consistent beaming light, and you feel your way into alignment with it. Until you do that, you have no way of telling where you are along your journey. In other words, we see people, the journey between Phoenix and San Diego is easy to understand, but the journey between sickness and wellness is not so easy. And it's so easy to get off track where you stop and take score about where you are, not realizing that 99% of it must be completed vibrationally. So we see people who are still sick in terms of the way their bodies are testing, but who have moved into hopefulness, and so their energy is moving. They're almost on the brink of utter and total recovery when they go back and get another test taken, which causes them to focus upon where they are, and then it's like vibrationally turning around and going back to Phoenix. And people don't realize that if they could really care about the way they feel, and that if that could be the dominant criteria that they use about whether they focus upon something or not, oh, your lives would become so splendid so quickly.
Yes, yes. And I have been using that, and it has changed.
Yes.
Things change when I decide to focus on something that makes me feel good.
Well,
and it's just such a revelation.
You see, you've talked yourself into this now, and so now there's no turning back for you. You're just, things are just going to get better and better and better for you. But we see even Esther from time to time will use a different criteria than how it feels as her reason for doing something. She watched the presidential debates, for heaven's sakes. And if you would ask her, as Jerry did, why are you doing this? Esther said, so that you can take long, long walks Why are you doing this? Esther's reply was, it's interesting. I find it stimulating, and I want to be informed. And we say, all perfectly fine intentions, unless there is another intention that is being overridden, which is, how does it feel? In other words, if Esther were watching the debates and joyful, we would have said, of course, watch them. But she was not joyful while she watched them. She was not joyful after she watched them. She was not joyful long after she watched them. She was not joyful getting ready for the next one. She was not joyful in any part of any of it, you see. It just stirred her up. Now, we will give her this. It did contribute mightily to her rockets of desire.
Right.
And all contrast does that. But rockets of desire go off easily. We don't think you need to torture yourself to give birth to rockets of desire.
Thank you.
So
it brings me to my next question, and that is that it's as I look at things differently, everything comes back to me differently. For example, I went to see a play with my daughter who's very into drama, and it was a very new kind of drama called theater grotesco, and it was shocking, and it's about magical realism, and I found myself not interested at all in something that would have used to have fascinated me, because I'm coming at it from a different perspective. It just it seems sort of very show-offy or something.
Well,
and
we want you to understand that there isn't anything. We don't want the presidential debates to feel off limit to Esther.
No.
We just want her to use the criteria of how she feels. So we want her to bring herself into a different vibrational place before she watches them.
Okay.
So that and it may be that she'll watch them in joy, and it may be that she'll gravitate to something else. The other day, she was sitting with Jerry and friends in the Monster Bus. They were in San Diego. And Jerry was playing a piece of music that he particularly loves and plays every day. It's A Wonderful World. And the four of them were sitting and listening to this and feeling deeply the sentiment of the words. And Esther looked out of the window of the motor coach, and between two other motor coaches, as if it was framed just for her to see, she saw an American flag waving in the breeze. And that got her thinking in the middle of this song about how she yearns for a wonderful world that right now does not feel so wonderful. And afterward, she talked to us about it quite a bit because it bothered her. She remembers as a child, and even when she and Jerry were coming together, every time Esther saw an American flag, she thrilled over it. She loved the feeling of it. The bigger it was and the more it was waving, the better she liked it. And she doesn't get that same buzz from the American flag today. It hurts her heart a little bit to see her because it reminds her of things unsettled and in chaos. And we said to Esther, we want you to look at the flag and return to your chosen feeling of patriotism without needing your government to be different than it is. In other words, pride feels so much better than criticism or condemnation. But unconditional pride is like unconditional love. You do it because that's the signal that calls you, not because your object of attention necessarily deserves it. And that's the way all the rockets of desires that you've launched become an eventual reality, because somebody holds vibrational countenance and consistency with the dream. In other words, you can launch all the rockets of desires in the world about better world and people living free and peace on earth. But unless you find a vibration that matches your desire, you can't be a catalyst to assist it. In other words, Esther cannot wish for something and beat the drum of something else and ever be in vibrational alignment with what she wants. Nor can she demand that anybody, a spouse, a government, a child, a grandchild, a friend, an employee, a waiter in a restaurant. In other words, you just can't demand that their behavior improve and get to where you want to be. You have to get to where you want to be, whether their behavior improves by your standards or not. Mm-hmm. And then you are finally and utterly free, and then a major contributor to a better life on earth.
I'm hearing what you're saying, and I think I'm just in a state of adjusting because I'm looking at everything in such a new way.
Well, your question could not have been a better one, because you said to us, I want to talk about feeling good. Mm-hmm. And we want to think about all of the different, pride feels good, appreciation feels good, mm-hmm. love feels good, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. adoration feels good, yeah. Criticism doesn't feel so good. Mm-hmm. Finding fault with someone doesn't feel good, even if they deserve it. Mm-hmm. But finding fault with someone feels good if you've been finding fault with you. Finding fault with someone feels better than finding fault with you. Blame always feels better than guilt. It's higher on the emotional scale. Uh-huh. So if you're feeling guilty, or like you are out of control, or like you have no control, then moving up the emotional scale just a little bit is feeling better. Joseph Campbell offered the best words we've ever heard in human form when he said, the secret to living life is following your bliss. It will bring you all things wanted. And we say, no truer words have ever been spoken, but sometimes you can't get a whiff of bliss. If you're vibrating somewhere in despair or fear, mm-hmm. or even rage or revenge or even anger, bliss is a far vibrational cry from where you are, you see. And so when we say we want you to feel good, what we really mean is we want you to feel as good as you can feel from where you are. And we don't want you to compare how good you feel with how good you think anybody else feels, because that's irrelevant. You can't factor in how good they feel, because you don't know what their points of vibrational relativity are. You might have some things in common, but you really don't know. Mm-hmm. So that's why this feeling thing is so important, because it helps you to tell where you are. If you are moving up the emotional scale, and you're moving from hope into believing into knowing, and we were an academic teacher, we would give you an A for that trek up the emotional scale. And if you were in despair and you moved into revenge, we'd give you an A for moving up the emotional scale. In other words, we don't give A's for this vibration and B's, C's, D's, E's, and F's for this vibration. We applaud any improvement that is deliberately applied to your vibration, because that is deliberate creating. And we would never want anyone to look right squarely at something abhorrent and not wanted and feel good. That's not our message to you. We don't want to train you to look at horrible things, even plays that aren't pleasing to you, and feel good. We want you just to show yourself that you have the ability to focus your way into a way that you can feel good. In other words, everything is two subjects. Esther can look at the American flag and she can see freedom and democracy and patriotism, or she can see imperialism. In other words, it's all there to see. It's all there to see, and for her to need it to be different, for her to see it the way she needs to see it, takes her power away. But when she discovers that she can look in anything, any segment of the population, any individual, any subject, even the presidential debates, and find something that she wants to see, she can find alignment. Okay. That's what we mean by feeling good. Yeah. Feeling as good as I can feel as I look at this. And if I can't find a way of feeling good about this, then I will look at something else. But it is ever so helpful to look at the things that you don't feel so good about and bring yourself to a better feeling place, because your vibration is where you last left it. Mm-hmm. Many years ago, Jerry and Esther lived in Arizona, and they did not have a very happy time while they lived there. And one of the culminating factors was in traffic one day, after being in San Diego and driving back across the hot desert to Phoenix, with Esther complaining every mile of the way, why don't we live in San Diego? Why don't we live in San Diego? Why don't we live in San Diego? It is 1 o'clock in the morning. They're driving down a freeway, and the freeway is crawling at about 4 miles an hour. Typical, in Esther's view, of the way Arizona highways are handled. And Esther said, I hate this. We will leave some words out here, city.